Welcome to Failed Forward, a podcast for professionals who are wondering, how the hell did I get here?
Join your host, Rachel Durkan, and me, Donna Miller, as we discuss the messy, bumpy, and often unattractive journey to success.
After all, if it isn't hard to do, is it really worth doing? Hello, and welcome to Failed Forward, the podcast for those of us wondering, how the hell did I get here? My name is Rachel Durkan. I'm with Paradigm Marketing and Design. We are a web marketing, branding, and sales enablement agency that I always say customizes, Donna, that specializes in working with clients with a complex sale. So if you require a sales team to close a deal, we can help you build a marketing to sales infrastructure that is going to increase the number of qualified meetings your sales team is having and help them increase their close rate. And I am joined every other week by my lovely and talented co-host, Donna Miller. Hello, Donna.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Donna Miller. I am founder of C3 Workplace and Donna Miller Business Growth Consulting, where for the last 30 years, we've had the great good fortune of helping thousands of companies to accelerate their growth. And we do that by providing advisory and implementation services around finance, operations, and biz dev. So our clients bring us in because they know that we will build cohesive, efficient systems that work together, that they can execute on or we can help execute on. And the goal is to help our clients build organizations that run and grow without them, so that, they can kind of have a life, get off that hamster wheel that we talk so much about here. So that is a little bit about me. And in this episode of Failed Forward, we are delighted to be joined by the fabulous Lauren Lynch. So Lauren, tell our audience about your fabulous self.
Sure. So I am the Chief Marketing and Culture Officer for Mandelbaum Merritt, which is a nearly 100-year-old full-service law firm. And I have a really interesting and unique role in that I have two roles. I oversee a really wonderful team of 7 marketing professionals. We work with the strategy and implementation of marketing initiatives for 100 attorneys in 35 distinct areas. Yes, 35 different areas. And then as the Chief Culture Officer, I also work very closely with our HR and leadership teams on things like attorney development, associate mentoring programs, team building, charitable giving, and effectively sharing and making sure that we're living by what we call the MB promise, which is something that I worked very closely with our team on, ensuring that we're doing the things that we say that we should be doing. And it's things like leading with empathy and making sure that you're mentoring your employees and that they're feeling good about coming to work every day.
So I've known Lauren for years. She is incredible. I mean, both personally and professionally. The things you juggle and manage never cease to amaze me, and sometimes make me feel a little inferior, but that's okay. And just incredible. But we were talking a little bit before that we started recording, Lauren, about kind of your mantra and how you struggled in the beginning with this. So talk to us first about your, what you struggled with, and then let's talk about the mantra.
Sure. I mean, for me, one of the biggest challenges I think I've ever faced in my career is giving and receiving feedback. And honestly, it's both ends of it, whether it's, taking feedback from others or having to be the one that, as you grow as a leader, you're going to have to give feedback to others. And even though it sounds simple in theory, for me, it was always so challenging. Like when I started out my career, I would take it very personal if I was told, oh, you need to improve here, or you're trying to do this and things like that. And, how do you deliver that without feeling kind of demotivated? And one of my biggest things that I always try to do is lead with empathy. And I think that comes into play so much when you're giving feedback to people. And how do you do it in a way that doesn't demotivate them and actually motivates them, and kind of listening to them? And I think for me, it was always also then taking feedback from not just my leadership team, but also from my employees too, and being open to that and not taking it personal, but realizing that it's actually something that can be really good for everybody involved.
I mean, I wouldn't say that you're a type A personality, right? An overachiever. That couldn't be you. I feel like so many of us overachievers struggle with that, where feedback, because we put so much of ourselves into our work. Absolutely. That it feels personal. But I find now I think of feedback as a gift. I love radical candor. I love everything about that. I love accountability. Not giving feedback is the worst you can do to somebody. I always say there's nothing worse than when somebody gets fired and they didn't know that they were going to get fired. Like that's Absolutely. Just like, so how do you handle it now?
Yeah. So I've kind of taken sort of a 2 or 3 step approach here where I always start with the positive and I make it a point to highlight what somebody did well before going over any areas of improvement. I just think that it sort of sets that stage and creates a much better sense of balance, and it kind of helps to keep it more constructive. I've also learned to really stay away from anything that's vague, like, oh, this isn't good or whatever, and really be specific in ways that it can be approved upon, and make it so that the feedback feels more like guidance than criticism. I think that's really important. And then I've also, I don't think that feedback should be a monologue. And I've learned to kind of ask for others' perspectives and, how do you feel about it? And not being afraid to say how I feel about it too. Like if I'm the one receiving it, say, okay, I appreciate that you said that. This is why I may have taken that approach, or I'd love to hear from you other ways that I can improve upon it, and almost force the conversation and make it a two-way street. So it's not just that monologue of this is what you did and you need to fix it.
What do you say to those people who need processing time? Like I always find one of my things I've learned as a leader is I think very quickly and I can respond
Yeah,
in the
you do.
moment. I have many team members who are like, I need an hour, I need a day.
Yep.
Which to me is so foreign. My husband needs it too. I'm like, why? But I've learned to accept it. So how do you handle that when people need processing time?
So, I mean, I think a lot of it is understanding and kind of meeting people where they are. And
Mhm.
so I'm more than willing to give that and say, okay, you know what? I know that this is a lot. I can clearly see, and a lot of it's reading the body language too, right? Like I think you can kind of tell how somebody's taking what you're saying and kind of processing it. And I've been in that situation and had to say, okay, you know what? Let's meet again next week. Let's take a little bit. And I'd love for them, and I almost give them like a call to action or a challenge with it,
Mhm.
like saying something along the lines of, when we meet again this week, why don't you and I both come to the table with one way that we can improve
Action.
or a
Yeah.
suggestion and action? And that way it sort of kind of motivates them to, okay, this is the feedback I got, but she's also coming to the table with something and with an idea for me. And I think
Mhm.
that way, processing time, I'm the same as you are. I make decisions kind of really quickly and don't look back.
Mhm.
Not
For the
everybody,
good or bad, nobody knows, but
Right,
that's what
right, right.
happens.
it is what it is.
Mhm.
But Lauren, let's rewind a tiny bit. And one thing that you talked about is, your theme is leading with empathy, which I get it. And I guess my question is, what I find interesting is, and I don't know if you've always been in the legal field, but a, a law firm full of 100 lawyers, I'm thinking you might be light on the empathy side. So you're in this kind of, the word that comes to mind is combative culture.
Mhm.
And so, how do you cultivate empathy when professionally they almost have to be less empathetic?
So I've actually always been in legal marketing. So since
Oh,
I started my career right out of college, and I went straight into a law firm. I worked for a medical malpractice firm in the city for 10 years before coming over to New Jersey and working in the legal market here. So I've only ever worked with attorneys. And
wow.
so and it took a long time to get to the point of this is what we have to do. Okay, the statistics are there, and I do a lot of research, and I recently wrote an article for the New Jersey Law Journal, and I wrote on the importance of culture in law firms and how the industry has done it one way for so long, and burnout is so high. We can't keep doing it this way. We're losing really great talent. They're all going in house. They're all going, they're leaving the legal industry. They're even going to consult for different companies, and it's because the culture isn't there. And so I've kind of made it my life's work to try and fix that and to really push that. And I've left cultures and firms where I didn't feel like that was being embraced. And I think it was really important for me to walk away and say, like, this is what's really important to me. And I hold, and I'm a big fan of, and I tell my husband this, and he believes this all the time. I hold people's feet to the fire and I say, look, you just lost 3 attorneys. This is why you lost them. And this
Mhm.
is what we have to do differently. And, we do all these things where we're trying to, it's not just about snacks in the break room, right? Anymore, it's, you got to do more than that. You got to really
Find a
be it and
snack.
live it. Right. I mean, I
So
like a good snack, but
yeah,
yeah.
who doesn't? So let me, I love what you're saying. I've also, and you mentioned again before we were recording about generations in the workforce. And I feel so old and crotchety now. I'm like these young kids, like I used to be the young kid, but I'm not anymore. Um, One of the things I struggle with is that line between empathy and accountability.
Absolutely.
Because I find that I'm not going to stereotype and say younger people, but I find that certain people, maybe it's less professional maturity, I think is the right word,
I
however
agree.
old you are. will lean into empathy so much that accountability lacks. And as a manager, I do tend to lead with empathy. It's my natural state. And I have to actually make myself stop because I
Yes.
let things
Mhm.
slide that I would hold myself accountable to them. But they had a hard day. They didn't sleep well, or like, so neither did I. But
Right.
where's that line and how do you draw it and how do you hold to it?
Right. No, and I think that's
Great question.
definitely, yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's certainly something that I struggle with, and I think you're absolutely right. As you've got different generations in the workforce, like when I started working, there were not really a lot of days off. I mean, I was in the office at 8 a.m. and I took the 6 o'clock train home, and it was 7:30 before I even, started to have any sort of a life. And I was fortunate then to have a really understanding mentor. That was our executive director at the time. And she said, you can have fun and you can do the things that you need to do, but you have to get done. That, like, there's got to
Mhm.
be that line of, I understand you've had a tough day and I'll give you the grace for that. But at the same time, this
Every
has to
day
be
can't be a
done.
tough day.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I have tough days too. I work a full day before I even get into the office. I've got two young
Mhm.
children, and my husband works and he's out early and everything. So I sort of put them to that too. And I say, look, I understand I had a rough morning as well, but this is what we need to accomplish today. And
Mhm.
if you need to take a quick walk or you need to, take a minute, totally okay. But, if I'm noticing a trend of you're taking too much time out of the office or you're not really doing it, we need to have a conversation. And I think it's frequent conversations that help, because then it gives you the opportunity to check in, not
Mhm.
just when they tell you, oh, okay, I'm having a rough day, I need to do XYZ. Okay, I understand that, but let's check in tomorrow morning
Mhm.
and let's go back over that project.
Yep.
And, I wouldn't
Yeah.
push out too far.
The other line I struggle with, and don't get me wrong, I am thrilled that we are talking more as a society about mental health and
I agree.
anxiety.
Hmm.
I think it's really important. I talk to my kids about it. One
Absolutely.
of the things that I'm finding a lot is people are bringing up at work, well, I have a lot of anxiety.
Hmm.
And again, and it's becoming I run into a line where is the empathy and when is it an excuse? Like,
Right.
anxiety is also can be a good thing to drive you. And so that's, I think what you just said is a good point. Like being flexible
Right.
and supportive, but accountability. I feel like that you have to have an equal amount of empathy to accountability. Because if you
100%.
only have empathy, no one's going to do anything. And if you only have accountability, the culture is going to suffer. And so you have to have it almost has to be a perfect balance, maybe sometimes a little more than others, but it's hard. It's a really hard balance, I find.
It is. I also think that when you're juggling empathy with accountability and hitting deadlines and billable hours and utilization
Mhm.
and realization and all those things that we have to do, um, I think that's where culture, if it's a good culture, will
Mhm.
help you say what needs to be said, and you're not saying it because the culture is. Maybe they're stepping up to help each other. Maybe they're stepping up to hold each other accountable. But I do think it is in the constant communication. And it is hard because you want to be empathetic, but you do have to hold them accountable. And one of the things that I've done when I've had to hold someone accountable in a difficult time is I will often use the phrase, Lauren, you talked about, starting with the positive things, which I agree. I think that's a good thing to do. And my transition statement will often be, listen, this might be hard to hear, but la la la. So I also try to, when I give that negative feedback, I try and tee it up in a way where they'll be ready for it. And
Mhm.
and kind of to Rachel's point, I've also moved away from the need to resolve the situation in one conversation.
Mhm.
That doesn't serve anyone. Sometimes it
Baby
happens, but I
steps,
think
yeah.
part of empathy is giving everyone their due processing time, especially when it's something difficult.
Mhm.
Mhm. And it gives yourself that processing time too. I think
Right.
sometimes in the situation, I'm like, okay, I'm going to respond very poorly here. And
I'm
it's
very
clear
I
that,
I'm heated, yeah.
yeah, like this is not going to go the right way. Let's just take a minute and let's kind of all go back, rather than, jumping into something that I'm not ready to jump into. And I also, for me, using the resources that we have on the team or as part of our team, I work very closely with HR. And there's times where I'm like, I need to bounce this off of you, because I can't really tell if I need to be less empathetic here, because
Mhm.
the situation is just not not going where it needs to go. And I don't want to, say the wrong thing. But I think it's also leaning on your peers, and even just talking to friends outside of things. Like we all have, you say it takes a village. I think it does. Not just
Yeah,
raising
you need
kids, but I
that.
think it takes a village to survive, work
Yeah.
too.
I
And I
think
think in this whole piece of accountability, and Rachel, I know you and I in our organizations have worked towards this, but there has to be a scorecard. We have to clearly know, what does success look like? What does failure look like? And that has to be unemotional.
Right.
and it has to,
Yeah.
but it can also align with what they want personally. So that's what
Absolutely.
comes in. But one of the things you said, Donna, I think is I just resonated with me, and I'm going to use it. It's a great cheat sheet. So I have managers who are naturally empathetic people,
Mhm.
and they're almost too empathetic to the point where when they give feedback, it's not heard. It's too soft. And so that sheet of saying this is going to be hard to hear, it sets the person up who's giving the feedback to be
It
direct,
wakes them up.
and it sets the person who's getting it up to hear it. And I'm going to use that now because that is the best cheat. Because if you're not direct and you want to soften blows, sometimes people don't hear the true feedback, and that's also detrimental to growth.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I take a little bit of a softer approach, and it's, I have something difficult to say. Are you ready? Are you in a place
That's
where
also
you're
good,
willing
yeah.
to hear me? And they can say no, and that's, that's fine too.
Absolutely.
Call me when you are. What if they never
Yes,
call
let me
you?
know.
Yeah, this is just a delay.
Next time you say that to me, I'm going to be like, I'm not ready. And then you'll have to wait like a week and a half.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Well,
think it's also too, like, how you build yourself as a manager and a leader too. Like, I hope that my team understands and knows that when I tell them things, whether it's good feedback, criticism, whatever, I'm coming from a place of, I want to develop you and I want you to strive and succeed.
Mhm.
I'm not coming at it from a place of, look, I think you're doing a terrible job or this. I'm telling you because I see what the attorneys are saying, or I see what's going
Mhm.
on, and I'm noticing, like, are you having a rough day? Because let's talk about it. And if you are,
Mhm.
let's take a minute, let's go out. But I want them to understand that I'm coming from a place with any feedback that I give. Like, I care about you, not about the job.
And that's why it's important to always constantly talk about development. What does someone want? Where do they want to go? I will help you get there. So when I'm
Yep.
giving you feedback, it's with intent.
yeah. And I think all of this ties into culture, because if you've got the right culture, you expect the conversations, you welcome the conversations, you're giving good feedback, and you're leading with empathy. So, Lauren, time always flies on these podcasts. And as we bump up against the end, my question for you is, if you could go back and do one thing differently, what would it be?
So I think for me personally, if my mid-40s self could talk to my mid-20s self, I would definitely have told her to be kinder to herself. Like, I've learned the important lesson to put up my boundaries and protect myself, even whether it's getting criticized or well-intentioned feedback. Giving 100% at work doesn't mean giving up who you are and enjoying
Uh-huh.
everything else. So I would
Love that.
definitely have done differently. I would have learned to leave my work day at work way
Mm.
sooner than I did. It took a long time to realize that 110% of myself doesn't mean that I have to absorb it and absorb. You're an empath too, Rachel. I know you kind of understand this.
Mhm.
Taking on everybody's problems can feel really big, and you don't
Yeah.
have to
Yeah,
solve everybody's problem.
no.
Mhm.
And you're not helping them by doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. So, Lauren, how does our audience reach you?
Sure. So my email is lynch@mblawfirm.com. And I'd love to chat about workplace culture and empathetic leadership anytime.
Awesome.
If they need
Thank
a
you so
lawyer,
much.
she knows one. So
And
call
and I do know a good
professional.
lawyer or two. Or
Or
107.
100.
You're my first phone call if I ever end up in the slammer. I'll be like,
Oh,
Right.
ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay.
I'd probably
Well,
be there with you, Rachel.
yeah, well, that's true. We'd be like, I'll be like, go call your person.
all right. Well, ladies, thank you for another amazing episode. So until next week, well, next 2 weeks, we're now doing them every 2 weeks. We hope that you embrace failing forward, because that is the path from where you are to where you want to be. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.